Hello, everyone. I'm Lark Lowe, and today we have Chancee Lundy Russell. She's a small business owner, author, wife, mother, friend, cookie addict, and Outcast fan. Still waiting on the reunion. That's not happening. She believes that life presents us all with a unique set of challenges, but it's our response to those challenges that shape our destiny. This Selma, Alabama native is a community conscious engineer who co-founded NspireGreen LLC and an urban planning engineering firm in Washington, D.C. Through this firm, her work focuses on engaging the public in projects that impact them, developing transportation plans, and preventing and reducing environmental inequities in marginalized communities. Chancee was a first-generation college student that saw her education as the key to transform her circumstances. She received her master's degree in civil engineering from Florida State and holds a Bachelor of Science in Environmental Science from Alabama A&M. Mrs. Lundy is a global citizen and has led and participated in trainings on social justice issues and engineering achievements in Accra, Ghana, Mali, West Africa, Nairobi, Kenya, and Bosnia. In addition, she's participated in the International Scholar Laureate Program Delegation on Engineering to China, and she's a past national chair of Black Youth Vote. But there's so many things that you've done, and we're going to get into all of that because I just, typically, like I told you earlier, I talk just about people's work, but I feel like your story is just, it's so inspiring. Like, you even have a book like 31 Days to Devotional Empower Your Womanhood. I think that your story is a great story, but we're going to go into that later. But, let's go a little bit more into what's Inspire, in case people didn't see our episode with Veronica, and what's your role at Inspire?
So I'm one of the co-founders of NspireGreen, and whereas Veronica's focus is more on transportation planning, mine is on the environmental side of NspireGreen. So I focus a lot on climate change and resiliency, working with marginalized communities, developing plans, or for example, one of the things that we've been working on a lot is reducing pollution in one of the urban waterways within the District of Columbia. So I do a lot around preventing or eradicating environmental inequities in communities.
Yeah, that's important work because, there's so many times with our communities, it seems as if all of the trash and the dump and the pollution they put it disproportionately in Black communities or Absolutely. Black and brown communities. Mm-hmm. I want to ask a little bit about your experience at Alabama A&M. Now you went there and studied environmental science in Alabama A&M. Do you feel as a first generation Black college student that you picking a historical Black college helped in you getting on your path?
Absolutely, because when I went to Alabama A&M, it was not for environmental science. I really didn't have any idea about environmental science. I was going to major in political science and become a lawyer. But while I was at Alabama A&M, I thought about some of the community organizations and things I participated in as a teenager. And I would go to workshops and people talk about environmental racism. I'm like, how can the environment be racist? What is that? And so I learned more. One day I heard some girls talking short story, and I went back and looked. I loved politics. At one point I wanted to be a chemical engineer, and I looked up environment. I heard these girls talking about their major, and it was environmental science. And I saw that it had the perfect blend of politics and policy and chemistry and the biologies and the sciences that I loved. And so I wanted to be a person who could kind of analyze the data and really be able to translate that data for communities. And at Alabama A&M, I was able to do that, to kind of get my bearing and do the studying that I wanted to do around environmental justice, and that not be something that was seen as foreign to my professors, but actually was something that was celebrated.
No, that's wonderful. I also know that you are the inaugural class of the Bill and Melinda Gates Millennium Scholars. So, how is that to just be able to go to school and not have to worried about somebody coming after you? Because Sally Mae's never getting her money from me. How is it?
Well, I owe Sally Mae too, okay. but I received the Bill and Melinda Gates scholarship my senior year in college, and believe it or not, they would pay all the way through PhD. through the PhD program. I didn't go on to receive that terminal degree, but they did pay for my master's, the rest of my bachelor's program, and all of my master's. And having something like the Gates Millennium Scholarship alleviated such a burden for me, because I wasn't wondering, how was I going to survive through graduate school? I didn't have to worry about, while I did take some small student loans, but that really wasn't a major focus for me. I had this money, and they also paid in excess of what your tuition costs. So it gave you some money to live on. Someone like me, I didn't have family who put money into my bank account every week, every month, every year at all, basically. I was one of those students who, and I had a chance to talk to some high school students who were similar to me recently, who we were the ones who our families depended on us to send them money when we went to college. Like, have you got your refund check yet? We need to be able to pay some bills at home. And so I was one of those students. So having that scholarship kind of just helped lift the burden for me as a first generation college student, and someone just who didn't have a lot of income coming in.
No, that's wonderful. And what does environmental engineers do? I know, civic engineers, they build things. What do environmental, maybe that's a big question, but what do you guys do to help the environment or help the communities?
There are so many different facets of environmental engineering. Environmental engineering usually falls under one of two things: under the chemical engineering, which a lot of people who work in wastewater, treatment use, or you may have environmental engineers who work under civil engineering, so designing all of the sewer lines that are under all the buried infrastructure that is under your street, the solid waste, doing solid waste management plans, doing hazardous waste engineering, and figuring out how to manage stormwater, or just some of the we do a lot of the work in that realm. Air quality, when you think about what you breathe and all of the different emissions that comes from factories, cars, all those things, how we work on minimizing those emissions, and even finding out what those emissions are.
No, that's really important work, because that's something that you kind of don't think about. And that's something that really, really impacts, like later on, I want to talk about the South and how the lax regulations have really destroyed people's lives.
Absolutely.
But I want to go to Africa now. I want to know, what were you doing in Ghana and Mali, Nairobi, and even Bosnia, Herzegovina? What were you doing there?
All different things. So I went to Mali when I was 20. That was my first time going out of the United States. And I used to be a part of an organization called 21st Century Youth Leadership Movement. And we were a social justice organization, mainly of young people who we worked around voter education and voter registration. And we went to Mali. We were working with the Institute for Popular Education, and they were trying to make the language of instruction in school, because Mali is a French-speaking country. They were trying to make the language of instruction in school the same as the language that kids spoke at home. So it was about reforming the education system in Mali. When I went to Ghana, I was chair of the National Society of Black Engineers, and we happened to have a chapter in Accra, Ghana. Well, we had chapters across Ghana. So I went to Ghana in 2006 to do some trainings for some of our chapters. They're actually celebrating their 20th year of being NSBE chapters this year. But I went over there to do some training for our chapters around like program management and leadership. Bosnia and Kenya were under the same organization. I was a part of. Martin Luther King III used to have an organization called the International Youth Corps. And we went to Bosnia as well as Kenya, working with young people around conflict resolution. In Kenya, we went after the elections. It was a few years after they had like all of the violence after the elections, and we're working with young people to find out like how that impacted them and some of the changes that they were trying to make within their country and around the electoral system. In Bosnia, it was very interesting. We talked to young people around conflict management because of what happened in Bosnia with ethnic cleansing. And what was really interesting is everyone has the same look, but because some people were Muslims and Christians, we talked about the segregation that they experienced. Like Christians you could be in the same building as far as school goes, but Christians had to go to school in the morning, Muslims had to go at nighttime. And some of these things were still existing when we went in 2010, I think it was.
And another organization, Together Restoring Economic Empowerment, an organization committed to environmental and economic justice. Can you give us a little information about that organization?
Yeah, I'm an advisor to that organization. That's an organization that's local to the District of Columbia, and that is, and they're dedicated, really trying to get young people involved in environmental justice issues that are happening in their neighborhood and making them more environmentally aware. So I serve as more of an advisor to that organization, and just help and guide and advise how they run their programs.
Okay. And I know also you have an organization called Destination Liberation for young women to travel internationally in Selma, which I think is amazing because there's some people who don't have passports. They never leave the United States, never leave their state. So why did you start that organization, and why do you think it's important?
So I started the organization because, like I said, Mali was the first time that I went outside of the United States. And after that, I was like on the go. I always wanted to go somewhere, because I remember being in Mali, and I happened to be a college student, but I wasn't worried about credit cards. I wasn't worried about like debt. I was able to embrace the culture, to see where I came from, where my people came from, if you will, and just learn about people's unique experiences. And sometimes we can get so bogged down in our communities that we think that this is it. And I think that exploring other cultures, particularly with Destination Liberation, exploring cultures, and we think that Black people, sometimes in the United States, like these are all of the Black people that exist, and we don't really know about like Black people in Jamaica or in Brazil or in Colombia. We don't know like all the different countries. And how did we impact those countries, and how do we come to be? Like we survived. There's a history that we have in Africa, but then there's a history that we have throughout the diaspora that we've really helped build the foundations of these countries. And I think it's important for us to know who we are. And I think it's important for us to have more of a global perspective, because when you have that global perspective, you're more of an informed citizen. And I think that even with some of the policies that we see today that are happening, when you're more of an informed citizen, you make better decisions. You're more compassionate with people, and you're able to address some of the issues that are going on. And you're not really afraid of leaving your comfort zone. I know people now who are afraid of moving outside of their hometown. That's where they've always been. I've moved across the country several different times and lived in different places, and have been on my own since I was 18. And I just think that there's such a whole world out there for you to explore. You can always come back home, but whatever is happening to you, the condition that you're in, you can go somewhere else and change it, and just kind of be able to. And it also makes you appreciate what you have as well.
Well, I think that another thing that's great about you is your focus on business. I mean, I saw some interviews from you in the past, and you had a shoe company at one point. You are very kind of like, yeah, you care about the environment, but you also care about business, and you seem to think it's really important for people to understand, like, how are we gonna help a community if we can't, financially survive?
Absolutely.
So, I mean, how did you come about that decision? Like, how were you able to see that?
So I've always been a person. I don't think I've ever had a dream of like making it in corporate America. And I'm not a person who encourages people and says like, oh, you need to quit your job and go start a business. I am not one of those people, because business ownership is not for everyone. Someone has to be the employee. I mean, I need employees, but at the same time, I do think that if you have an idea and you have the passion, I came to it because I realized that in the box that I was working in, I wouldn't be able to do all the things that I wanted to do. But I also wanted to be able to reinvest in my community, and I wanted to be able to work and choose the different projects that I worked on. So I think that really enabled me to, that really made me think more about business ownership. And building generational wealth. And I'm not there yet by any stretch of the imagination, but, really think about more in terms of like building generational wealth. I've always even talked about like how we talk about sometimes when people get out of formerly incarcerated individuals. I always say the path to living your best life is to start a business, to be an entrepreneur, because as long as I've had a business, nobody has ever asked me to do a background check on me. You know what I mean? Like, so, people trust me with whatever it is that I say I can do, and I perform well. And I always tell people that if you can perform, if you can get people to trust you in the process, I think that goes a long way.
No, that's an excellent point. So kind of going back to the environment, why is the environment important to you? I mean, has growing up in Selma were there any specific things that you remember why you kind of go like, wow, the environment is actually a really important thing for us to all be concerned about?
Believe it or not, no. It was not at all. Like, I was surrounded by nature, one, because it's just the country. I mean, it's a rural, it's a small town, but when we would go to my family's house, which is really like about 6 miles outside of Selma, we would naturally, I had a great grandmother who had a well outside. And then I had they had plum trees, so we would pick plums and stuff like that. So it wasn't like I wanted to be, I just was this nature girl or anything. But then as I kind of grew up, and I went to college, I talked about environmental racism and exploring that more and finding out more about that. And for me, when I found out there was a case in Convent, Louisiana, and I remember like it was yesterday. It was about a company called Shintech. And that Shintech, there was a company that wanted to come into Convent, Louisiana, and they had all of these harmful air emissions. It was going to be a PVC. It was going to be a PVC company. And there was an old lady named Imelda West who like really fought against having that company come into Convent, Louisiana. And they lived in an area known as Cancer Alley. So to know that there were over 100 miles of, I think it's almost 100 miles of industries in Convent, Louisiana, where people were dying of cancer, like her daughter had died, neighbors all had died of cancer. That's what really made me think about, okay, we need to explore what's going on, because, I live in places where children are having respiratory problems. Even though that as here, people don't really think about the environment until something goes wrong. People didn't think about water quality until Flint happened. And then they're like, oh, well, where's my water coming from? And what's happening? What if my water source changed? A lot of people, I go into a room and ask, where does your water come from? Most people don't know the source of the water in their town.
No, that's so true. Go ahead.
And so as I explore that more and I think about, okay, and I go up and down some interstates sometimes, Interstate 95, like right when you're going on your way to Pennsylvania, there are houses that are immediately across the Jersey wall from the road. And this is an interstate. So think about all those people in those houses in the air emissions that they're breathing from cars all day long, and what that does in terms of their health problems. Uniontown, Alabama has gotten a lot of traction right now because more attention is being brought to the fact that coal ash from Tennessee is being dumped on that town. And then they have these sewage spray fields and people are all having all of these health problems. So there's just so many environmental issues that are going on. And that's really what sparked my issues. It's a justice issue, and it's not one that we talk about often. And it's one that I really think that people should be a lot more concerned about. When you look at landfills and how in some communities people are running out of space and landfills, and like, what are you going to do with the trash when you don't have a comprehensive waste disposal program? These are all things that should concern communities.
No, this is, and I think that's something that it's very bizarre to me that, you have the Black population, you have the South, you have this whole entire area of the United States where it seems that you don't have the kind of advocacy work that needs to be getting done. Have you found it challenging? Because I know you're as an environmental engineer and you're working on these environmental issues. Have people, other like traditional environmental groups, supported you? I mean, I don't know if that's something that you guys do in regards to NspireGreen, but things that I hear, especially like Flint and things like that, I'm surprised that it's like Black people who are on the ground who are bringing things to light, and not so much think people like the Sierra Club. You know what I mean?
Right. I think, in the recent years, some of those organizations have become a lot more involved, and a lot of them have environmental justice focus, but it's usually you hear more about whatever the big stories are. And so when something gets, like I said, Uniontown, Alabama has been getting a lot of light shed on it now, but that was because people have been working on the ground for years. Black folks have been in the trenches, like not shutting up. We won't be quiet. You won't kill me with this coal ash. They've just been relentless. And because of that, I don't want us to mistake that like people haven't been doing the work. There have been people on the ground for years. It's just like once they finally get that break, someone gives them a story. Someone gives them an opportunity to tell their story, and especially with social media and it spreads, people are getting more involved. So that's when you see people get involved. The issue in the South that we have is that the political capital. And it goes down to the political capital and just the financial, political capital is tied to some of the financial resources that these communities have. Most of these are poor communities. They don't have the financial will to really be able to donate. And we know that politics runs off money. If these communities were donating millions of dollars to somebody's coffers, they wouldn't have this issue in the first place. Nobody would be dumping on them. So they just have to raise holy hell until people pay attention and say, you know what, this is an atrocity that's happening in this community. I saw a news article a couple months ago that the Alabama Department of Environmental Management actually has the lowest budget in the entire nation. The Alabama Department of Environmental Management. So imagine the amount of work that they can do. I want to say, and I may be misquoting you here, but it sounded like the budget was almost like $400,000 or $500,000, whatever it was paltry compared to the amount of work that needs to be done in communities. And not only just because of those things, but thinking about resilience and just as we prepare for climate change, like what are we doing for some of our vulnerable populations that live along the coast or live along some of our waterways or are susceptible to extreme weather events?
No, I know. I mean, and I wonder also too, like I see that DC is being sued for trying to make DC whiter, by playing tricks to making it legal to discriminate against Black people. Mm-hmm. Do you find in areas that are gentrifying, because you work all over the South, do you find in areas that are gentrifying that when environmental concerns come up, all of a sudden it becomes more of a, oh, let's fix this now that there are people who are other than Black people moving here? Does that seem to ever come into play? Like I notice with streets and stuff, the streets become safer when white people move in. So I want to know, like for environmental, I mean, you might not even know this because that's not what you do, but have you noticed it just out there in the world?
I mean, anecdotal. So first of all, about the DC lawsuit, I just saw the headline today, and I hadn't had a chance to actually read it. I hadn't had a chance to really read the article and dissect that yet. Yeah. But I know that there is perception that once this community cleans up, I had someone tell me, "Oh, they're fixing the road outside. They must be doing that because of the white people moving in." And it's like almost a chicken or egg thing that there is. When you get increased tax revenue, when you get increased revenue into an area, there is money to do more with infrastructure projects. And that also at the same time means that some of that revenue may have come from a different community. That may come from white communities. And I don't want to necessarily say that. I will say this. One of the things that I have noticed working in public engagement is that sometimes we have become accustomed to being mistreated and not being listened to. So we just give up. And we may not. When I first started working in DC, there was an area that was flooding. And I remember talking to some of the Black residents and they were like, this has been doing this for 50 years. And now all of a sudden, since the white people moved in, they're trying to fix stuff. And they did feel like, why are they doing this now? But I also would say that white people were relentless. They would write letters to the mayor and say stuff like, you don't appreciate our rising tax base. They were just, always, again, it goes back to that political will. And it's a shame that has to be a part of it, because if you are an elected official, if you're in a position to help people, you should be helping people because they are human, just that they have human dignity and they deserve to be able to go outside and sit on their porch and not smell sewage when they're sitting outside. They should be able to have safe streets and be able to walk up and down their sidewalks and have really good infrastructure. They should not have issues with poor drainage and worry about flooding in their communities. And if they're going to drive this way during a rain event, that their car may get flooded or they may drown or anything like that. They shouldn't have to worry about those things. Unfortunately, it does happen that once you bring in folks who have more money into a neighborhood, people start paying attention to that neighborhood because they show up and they are relentless in letting you know what the problems are and that they will use their dollars to vote.
Okay. No, that's a really good point. I mean, the thing is I like to try to find out what's going on everywhere across the United States so we can kind of know, get advice, take notes on what should we do if this is happening. And I know something that's really interesting, that you are very involved in voting, very involved in voting rights. I think at one point we had something to do with voting. I forgot which organization you were with.
Yeah, so some years ago, I was the national co-chair for Black Youth Vote.
Yes.
Yeah. And so what was your question? I'm sorry.
No. The question was, how does voting tie into that? Because I mean, the thing is that you being from Selma, Alabama, you probably feel like I'm not more important, but yes, voting is such an important thing, especially being from the South and especially being from a place where it was people would kill you when you voted, if you voted.
Absolutely.
So how does that tie into, getting people to, people getting environmental justice voting and who they vote for and what they vote for?
Yeah, so I think so all of those things you said about me were true, just in terms of having family that participated in the civil rights movement, and Selma still being a place, the Black Belt area of the South, still being a place where you have large concentrations of Black people who are impoverished. So it's not just about the vote itself, right? Because in some places, Black people have the highest voting numbers. However, what they don't have is the political power and the accountability that comes behind it. Because it's like when we go vote on whatever Tuesday it is, that after that, that's it. That's not it though. Once you vote, like what comes behind that is that being relentless, that showing up at town halls, that showing up in that council member or mayors or whoever's office it is, showing up at city council meetings. And I know sometimes we don't have enough time in a day to do all of those things, but having a delegation who we send somebody this Tuesday, somebody else go to next Tuesday, and we constantly keep our agenda in the forefront and let people know that we are not going anywhere, that we will not be quiet. We're always keeping you abreast of our issues and making sure that you're taking our concerns to heart. And I think that people are using social media, quite frankly, to embarrass folks. When you say you're going to do something and you don't do it, we're using that to shine light on what you said you were going to do and what you actually did do. Voting just does not stop once you leave the voting booth. It is consistently holding people accountable for what it is they said that they are going to do.
Yeah. I mean, those are all good points. I would like to know, because we're going to wrap this up, what message would you like to leave our viewers to support their Black communities in regards to environmental justice and environmental issues like water? What things should we focus on? That's kind of a big question, but what's, just because a lot of people, we don't know. Okay, we know there's air pollution, but what's causing the air pollution? What should people, what organization or what city committee should people go to in order to support their communities in regards to environmental justice?
That can vary from city to city. I mean, it can be organizations like a Sierra Club, or it can be organizations that are just kind of homegrown organizations. I guarantee you there's always someone doing the work around an issue. And you may have heard of them and they kind of may be on the fringe, but really finding out what people in your community are talking about. One, finding out what your local Department of Environment, like what are some of the issues that they're working on? Are they working on water quality issues? And if so, then what has caused them to start working on those issues? Like what are some of the regulations? I mean, if I had more time, I could point to some online resources where you could find information about toxics that are released in your community from industrial I don't know if the EPA has it on their website anymore, so I'll say that in fairness. But there used to be a website where you could find out what toxics were released per company in your community. But it's really just kind of paying attention to the issues. And I guarantee you, like, there are issues that you may notice on a daily basis. Like if your air stinks, there's something that's making your air quality bad, whether it's a manufacturing industry, whether it's air emissions, whether it's the landfill is overrun. So figuring out that if you're concerned about your water quality, going to whoever your wastewater treatment plant or whatever the source of your water is from, and finding out what's in your water. What are the last time it's been checked and what the chemistry is of your water. And I'm not trying to be too technical with it, but just finding out that information. If there is flooding, like if there's poor drainage in your area, what are they doing about the infrastructure around that? Is it because you don't have enough inlets to let water off? Is it because they're clogged with trash? Like, what is the capital improvement plan look like for your city? Like each city, town, whatever should have some capital improvement plan. Infrastructure in America is old and needs money, but your city should have it listed. If I drop some money today, this is the capital that needs to be fixed in our city. We need to replace this bridge. We need a new sewer over here. We need to do some different things. So kind of finding out that there are so many ways to kind of go about this, but I guarantee you in every community, if there isn't somebody working on the issue already, that's a perfect opportunity for you to get in.
Okay. But no, I think you gave us some really good tips of what to be looking at and what to be asking and all those questions. And, possibly one day we will have you on our Plan Black chat, because you have an actual skill set that not everybody has. And it's not easily Googleable. We can't really Google this kind of information because you don't know. In order to Google things, you have to actually have knowledge, a little bit of knowledge to know, and we don't know. So again, thank you so much, Chancee, for coming and speaking to Black Kids in Outer Space. We appreciate your knowledge that you've shared and the work that you've done in the past and the work that we know you'll be doing in the future. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, no problem.
Bye-bye.
Bye.